And I think our school system needs a complete overhaul.
Our top matrics are bad.
Without proper education, this country is not going to go anywhere.
So where are the solutions coming from and why aren't we finding them?
We don't have the necessary education.
The controversial incidents of blackface, first at the University of Pretoria and recently at the University of Stellenbosch, have added a different set of questions to the conversation about race in South Africa. Columnists such as Sisonke Msimang, Kaya Dlanga and Eusebius Makaiza have responded quite strongly to these incidents. The responses have been a critique of these students' behavior. However, the accused students maintain that their actions were not intended to be harmful, but were all in the spirit of fun. In studio tonight, we speak to politics honors students Jonis Alasow and Mikaela Erskog, and author of Memoirs of a Born Free, Malaika Azania. So let's start off the conversation tracing back the history of blackface and what its implications are in South Africa today. Malaika, could you take us back and let us understand why we're speaking about it now?
You know, the reality of the situation, and it's very unfortunate, is that this issue is being projected as if it's a very new phenomenon, that it is something that has not happened in the past, that it is something that is, people are treating it like there's something shocking about the fact that it's happening today. However, the reality of the situation is that, in fact, for very many years, as South Africans, we have been celebrating blackface without being aware that we are doing it. One of the things that for me stands out when we talk about this phenomenon of blackface is movies, for example, by Leon Schuster, somebody who South Africans in general tend to celebrate as one of the best entertainment minds in our country, as one of the best actors that we've had, and so on, and there seems to be a very deliberate delinkage between what has transpired at these institutions of higher learning, Stellenbosch and Pretoria, and that which we have come to accept as a society. So it's almost as if we pick and choose what we want to be outraged about, rather than draw a link between that which we have come to accept as a norm and that which we see manifest today. Blackface has been going on in South Africa as far back as the old dispensation. It's not something new. You read books, for example, there's a book by, I forgot the name of the professor, but the name of the book is called An Act of Immorality, which basically speaks about that particular act that was, passed as legislation during the apartheid era. But it also speaks about, it's almost like a memoir, and it speaks about how, the socialization of Afrikaner students during that time in institutions of learning, from primary school right through to tertiary. And these are some of the things that they used to do during the initiation processes. I know that the book speaks in particular about the University of the Free State, and I think it was also at Wits University at some point in the 1970s, 1980s. This thing was seen as a kind of, they would do documentaries about this blackface phenomena. And so I think that it's for me, it's both very appalling, but also quite very interesting as well, that we want to treat this blackface phenomena as something very new, whereas for quite a long time in our country, we have come to accept it, and we've been very desensitized about it as it happens, because it has been presented as some form of entertainment. It's only now that we become outraged because it has, I don't know if it's because it's no longer done in the setup of entertainment in the traditional sense of the word, or what the case may be, but it's not a new thing. It's not new.
And I think it's interesting that you point out the question of outrage and what it means then to be outraged by something like this, and why one is outraged by something like this. And if I can just redirect the question then to intent. Mika, if you could just shed some light on the idea of intention. I say this because in spite of the backlash that happened after the incident at the University of Pretoria, it still happened in Stellenbosch. I feel that there is perhaps a disconnect in the conversation on race, and something is not being translated as to why these incidents are exactly problematic the way they are. But there is the defense of intention. I did not intend to cause any harm. I am not racist. I did not intend to be racist. What do we make of those kinds of responses?
I do think that the conversation that focuses or gears towards understanding intent, was it deliberate, was it not deliberate, is neither here nor there, because the issue is people were offended. How do you move on from this point? How do you engage with it from that point on? How do we constructively deal with these people and then teach a lesson that, will really resonate in the longer term, in the long term? But it's interesting because, again, this idea of history and trying to actually historically position this type of incident is interesting because, if we're looking in the 1840s in the Cape and coming from being exported a lot from America, is that blackface was traditionally used to absurdify and make other of black people. So in that context, it was intentional to make of the black person a fool, to make the black person other, to make them antithetical to whiteness, and in that context, to all that is good. So I do think it's a problem then if we're not understanding that this has come historically out of an intent to harm a particular group for particular reasons.
Jonis, do you agree?
Yes, I do agree. I think it's very interesting. I agree that these girls and the people in Stellenbosch later on, I don't think that they woke up and decided, I'm going to go and be racist. It wasn't a conscious decision to do this. And I think that's where the most interesting question lies. It's not a matter of, I mean, are these bad students, are they good students? It's how is it that they could go and do this without recognizing the racism that's inherent in it. And I think I definitely agree with what Mika's saying, that it's not, because the way in which racism is discussed is from the perspective of the racist, so that we are looking, is this person intending to be racist or not? But I think it'd be much more useful to look at, and I think racism in itself, it operates the other way around. It was perceived as racist. This is something that people were offended by. Many people in South Africa were offended by it. So once we've recognized that there has been this offense, that people did it, and that people did it without necessarily meaning to do it, then the question becomes one, and I think this is where the conversation around blackface is very limited, because it's limited to these incidents of blackface, whereas we should rather be looking at the society that allows for incidents like that to occur. And I think that's maybe where South Africa should be having this type of conversation. Because, I mean, these people dressed up in this way, but they went to a party where no one confronted them about the way in which they were dressed. No one said, look, do you know the history of what you are doing at the moment? Whether it's intentional or not is actually immaterial, but no one confronted it. And I have no doubt that similar incidents probably have occurred and they are likely to occur in other parts of the country. So I think the question is this a question around our society, and how is it that we've allowed this to continue and to happen and to offend people without recognizing the racism that's inherent in it?
And speaking of the broader question and how this affects the country as a whole, and it not being, relegated to one incident or two incidents, how do we understand or try and make sense of the responses of these institutions? If you look at the response of the University of Pretoria, they decided to suspend their students and expel them from RAIS as well. And whereas, the University of Stellenbosch decided to take a more reconciliatory, kind of restorative measure. And my question here is, what approach are we looking to that makes perhaps the most sense, or furthers the most kind of conversation that's useful and that's effective and that addresses these kinds of questions? Which response from which university are we looking to, and which would we say we are more comfortable in as South Africans? Mika, would you like to interject there?
I think we even have to look further back and look at what happened at UFC with Jonathan Yanthan's response to the Red 4, because I think that played into this, TRC, forgive and forget, rehabilitate, and we need to look at how then that has possibly, intervened here, and whether has that been sustainable. I think maybe we need to look at where are those people now, and what has the outcome been of that process, because on the one hand, if we are just simply to expel them, kick them out of the system, we're doing them no good. And where's the conversation? Do they know what they did wrong? Because I spoke to a friend of mine who's at Tux, and she said the most disturbing thing is there hasn't been dialogue about this. Nobody's actually spoken about why is this an issue? Why should we talk about this? And I think that's disturbing, that there's no dialogue over and it's very much it almost seems like I hate reading the commentary sections, but in the commentary sections it's very polarized between this is completely racist, they must go, and they're just having fun. And I think it just lacks a real dialogue as in why do we on this side find it racist, and why on this side are we so implicitly feeling like it's just fun.
Malaika, your thoughts?
Look, I think that once we begin to reduce these kinds of incidents to the people who perpetuate them, or these young kids at Stellenbosch or at University of Pretoria, I think for me, we already become reductionist in our analysis of the situation. For me, whether or not we expel them or we rehabilitate them, for me, it's an issue that is neither here nor there. Because I feel that once the remedy or an antithesis to this crisis that we are facing, and I say it's a crisis very deliberately, but once the thesis to this crisis that we are, antithesis to this crisis that we are facing is that we need to deal with the individuals who perpetuate this, then I think we've already missed the point in the first place. So for me, I think that both institutions, the responses of the institutions do have some element, must be problematized. UP must be problematized because when, and I think I like something that he said earlier on about on the question of intent, that you might find, and it's very likely, that these young people did not deliberately, consciously sit down and say, today we are intending to be very racist and very anti-black. We are going to go and paint ourselves in this particular manner and dress in this particular fashion because we want to deliberately go and offend black people. But it happened nonetheless. What that tells you is that this kind of behavior is more a product of a socialization into a particular type of society more than it is an issue about individuals wanting to be malicious. So it's these young black children who are raised in families where, for example, you would find that the only interactions, the first interactions they've ever had with a black person was their black mate, their black nanny, their black gardener, and so on and so forth. So this child grows up into that kind of a society where for them the first reference to blackness is a laborer, it's somebody who works for them, and so on and so forth. And so you begin to realize and appreciate then that it's not that the actions that they then do when they're in their tertiary in tertiary institutions and in their teens or in their young adulthood is not necessarily actions of people who are deliberately malicious, more than it's action of people who have throughout their lives been socialized into looking at blackness in a particular type of way. And so for me, there is the solution, or rather the process that we need to begin to engage in, is one of bringing this particular issue back into society and beginning to understand. In fact, you don't like reading the commentaries, right? I write for the Sunday Independent, and there was a time when I would not read the comments. I'd just write articles and I'd leave them at that, and I would not read the comments because I'd always feel that they are very reductionist, very reactionary, and so on and so forth. But I found that it's actually very important for us to understand where our society is in terms of how it understands the issues that we think are of critical importance. We need to start following and understanding what other people thinking. In those kinds of comments, you find a particular narrative of a society that begs for critical analysis. We must not dismiss it and say, these ones are saying this is nothing wrong, these ones are saying these ones are racist. We must begin to reconcile these two kinds of responses from our society, and from that begin to understand where our society is in terms of understanding the implications of these kinds of actions. So I do think that UP was too harsh because I want to believe, and I mean, perhaps it's I want to believe it's the inherent goodness that I think many people do have. I want to believe that these students genuinely did not really want to become very malicious and anti-black, but they are a product of a particular socialization. And it is that socialization, that white supremacist outlook that they grow up in this unequal society, that we must begin to look at and bring it out into the entire country, not just reduce it and confine it to the institutions where it happened. Because at Rhodes, it might be, for example, a different issue. Our students might not paint themselves black and portray themselves as black laborers. But you could find that there are students at Rhodes University itself that think that black people's place is in working for them, that do not respect black people who are professionals, who have worked hard, and so on and so forth. So it must not be reduced only to the paintings of faces. It must translate into a deeper conversation into how we relate in terms of race in our country.
Jonis, your thoughts?
I agree with a lot that has been said, and I think just on your last point, I think I have little doubt that a blackface incident could occur at Rhodes. I don't.
And actually, I've heard of. There was a party last year. I'm sure I've heard of people dressing in. It was like a Zimbabwe-themed party where people are dressing in caveman rags, and somehow this is what Zimbabwe is about. And that happened. I know it happened in this town.
That's
so also,
upsetting.
it is a problem if we now are making this. It's because those demographics are primarily white spaces that they have the problem. Rhodes does have an issue, and even worse because we think we're better off, but
yes. So I definitely think that. So that's what. But I think my approach to these blackface incidents is slightly different, because I don't see them as these anomalies or these kind of peculiar and exceptional situations that have occurred. and that they are punishable offences, I see them rather as kind of indicators
Yes.
of where we are
In a
as South
society.
Africa. And I'd say so South Africa as a large society, I think university spaces in themselves in South Africa also, we can see these incidents as indicators of where they are. And that's why I say that I think it can happen here, because our kind of societal mindset at Rhodes is not all that much different to the one that we have in South Africa and in these universities. So having said that, and I think I've mentioned it before, my view around Blackface is definitely that we need to look at what does Blackface say about South Africa and about the society. And in that, following that logic, I think both expelling people or saying that, well, you need to admit that you're wrong and then we need to have some kind of a reconciliation, both of those assume that there's a disconnect between these perpetrators and the university or the society. So we're saying UP as a whole is okay. There were these two girls that were problematic. Or Stellenbosch as a whole is fine. It's just these these guys that are a problem. And I think that is a completely unhealthy approach to it, because that denies the significance of these, like I said, social indicators more than anything.
But also, I think that, it's very interesting now when you're speaking about it. I'm thinking about something, that when such incidents happen in institutions of higher learning, as an indicator to where we are in society, it becomes very scary. And I say this because I would want to believe, and this is not to assume an air of superiority about us being, students at institutions of higher learning or graduates and so on. But the fact that something of this nature, something so grossly ignorant, so malicious in its history and its orientation, that such a thing would happen in an institution of higher learning where you would expect people to be better enlightened than the ordinary person, is very scary. I mean, I want to believe that a person who is at Rhodes University today, who has got access to, reading material, to literature, who gets to engage in critical discussions and critical, to shape discourse in society, is a bit better oriented, ought to be a bit better orientated in their thinking than a person who has not had access to institutions of higher learning, whose, highest level of education past is matric and so on and so forth. But that a person who is supposed to be the intelligentsia, so to say, of society, would still find themselves locked within the confines of that very regressive and reactionary type of thinking and that very colonial mentality, for me, is very scary. And what it says about our society and about the types of people, of products that are being produced by our institutions of higher learning, what it says about what we are producing in institutions of higher learning, it's scary. And that is why, for me, I think it's critical what he says, that so therefore, when we look at it as this one is a problem at Rhodes, but Rhodes is not a problem, it becomes a bit too simplistic and regressive in its approach.
I think speaking about these societal indicators is really important. And when we come back, we'll speak about pop culture and how Blackface has infiltrated pop culture and has influenced the way that we think about race in South Africa. We'll be back soon.
We watch Opi TV. I watch Opi TV. Do best and watch Opi TV.
Okay, so I don't know what you're watching, but I'm definitely watching Opi TV.
Yeah, man.
You watching Opi TV as well?
Yeah,
right? Definitely.
Have you watched Oppi TV?
No, what's that?
It's like the best student run television show ever, so watch it.
Watch Opi TV.
Hey, I'm so bored.
Well, watch Opi TV.
I watch Opi TV, the best student television around. Bye.
Watch Opi TV.
Catch it live on Sunday.
Opi TV.
This Sunday, tune into Opi TV.
Watch Opi TV. Watch Opi TV. Watch Opi TV.
Seriously, watch Oppi TV.
Interested in Opi TV? Here's how to watch us online. Jump onto the oppitvwebcast.com in your web browser. Click the Opi TV tab and enjoy our wide range of video content on demand.
Watch Opi TV.
Hallo, ich heiße Marco Schäfer und ich bin auf Opi TV. Hi, my name is Marco Schäfer and I'm on Opi TV.
My name is Sam. Watch Opi TV.
Hi, my name is Titi and I'm on Opi TV. Hi, I'm Olivier. I come from Mauritius, and I'm here in Rhodes University to watch Opi TV.
Come and watch Opi TV.
My name is Olivia.
My name is Tari.
And we're watching Opi TV.
You're watching.
Welcome back to OppiTV Talk, where we're discussing blackface and its implications on race relations and reconciliation in South Africa today. Let's redirect the conversation to pulp culture, where blackface is used as a mode of entertainment.
You to do is meet me at the zoo in the morning at 9 o'clock.
Yeah, with the rest of the monkeys.
With the rest of the monkeys.
Yeah, I'll bring my grandpa with me.
I know Jack Sparrow, yes, I know Jack Sparrow, because he's the one that sings. The one that sings, I'm Jack Sparrow. Because for every if you are 90 kilos, for every kilo above that, it is one extra rand.
Moet my strand praat van kilos, bakkies en kilos.
No, julle boere wat julle drink Saterdag, nou julle wil nie. Man, jy het niks met die boere te doen nie.
There is definitely something different about the two of you.
Collagen.
You little witch! How did you know? Duh, it's totally obvious. Your lips went from Cameron Diaz to Jay-Z.
With so much drama in the industry, hip-hop police are listening. Be careful or you'll be history. Looks like another unsolved mystery.
Hey, the old man says we must not stay here. This place is for his ancestors. And
Are you crazy? It's only for one night. If his ancestors have a problem with that, tell them to come and see me.
Tom, we're darkies. What are we going to do?
I don't know what we're going to do. Oh, what do darkies do?
In this house, dishes, windows, washing.
What a crazy story. Woolworths had a few jobs. They're expanding. Woolworths came out and said, it's Woolworths South Africa. We've got a few jobs opening up. People who pack boxes, clean and stuff, only black people should apply. White people were like, what? Well, that's racist. Black people were like, yeah! Yeah! Now you know how it feels. Yeah, go away. It's our woolies now. Yeah!
Now, as seen in the clip, actors such as Leon Schuster have been playing blackface for years. And they don't seem to face the same kind of criticisms that we're speaking about today. What is it about pop culture that allows this to keep happening? And what are the kinds of implications of invoking issues of humor and entertainment into the question of blackface, and what implications that may have for our society? Jonis, could you start us off?
I was hoping not to answer that. Because I think this is the crux of the issue. Because it seems like most people are kind of agreeing on, or many people are agreeing on the blackface incidents at the universities. And of that clip that was shown, there were some things that I found exceptionally problematic and exceptionally racist. But then there are others where I'm kind of forced to ask myself, is it really that bad? Is it really?
Could you give an example?
For instance, I think the skit that Trevor Noah did at the end, when I compare that to that kind of little cartoon at the beginning, the cartoon at the beginning, I personally am offended by. The skit at the back, at the end, by Trevor Noah, I seem to have reacted differently to it, and it's something that I've been thinking about, but not quite been able to explain. Why is that? Why am I more offended by the cartoon than Trevor Noah? And I think perhaps a start is that I think many of these instances, I think the problem, we need to kind of historicize blackface. Blackface comes out of an entertainment industry which was concerned with finding humor in the caricature and the dehumanization of black people. And some of those clips did still have that elements of that. And I think, and there are many Leon Schuster skits where he does the same thing, and which I also find problematic. But sometimes it seems to me where he's employing blackface not so much to ridicule black people as he is to capture the reaction of South African society, of mainly white South African society, to black people. And I haven't quite managed to think this through, but I think that there might be a difference there, whether you are showing, as I think those girls did. I was wondering, I mean, they're dressing as black domestic workers. What's funny about that? Why is that? I mean, they went to a party assuming they wanted to kind of employ some kind of humor. And there I think it's problematic, because there the assumption is that just kind of a caricatured black body is funny or is humorous, and that comes out of that history of blackface. But, and I can't remember these clips now, but I know that there's some instances, and I think perhaps Trevor Noah fits into that category at times, where it's not so much the ridicule of black people as a commentary on society. And perhaps there's a difference there as well. But it is difficult, and I think this is where it becomes a strange terrain for people to try and understand why is it that because humor, and I think it would have been interesting to have someone here who's kind of an expert on humor, because what is it that we find funny, and why do we find certain things funny? And in our society, does that not perhaps also act as some kind of indicator of our society?
Mika, what were your responses?
I also find that the more contemporary examples do feel a lot more difficult to say that's wrong and that's right, just because on the little reading I've done on where black minstrels come from in America, at some point there were black people who were impersonating white people impersonating black people. So they are now trying to, like, on very multiple levels, trying to flip it on making a mockery of the way white people have tried to make a mockery of black people. So with White Chicks, that clip you maybe are considering, maybe they are trying to contrast white privilege through a person trying to embody that white privilege in a very, different way. But I can't say if, I guess it depends on your audience. I can't say if it's useful or not.
Malaika?
Look, I've always, I hold a belief that dominant ideas in any society at any given time are always going to be ideas of a ruling class. And things such as entertainment are not divorced from the ideas that are being perpetuated by a ruling class in a given society. So in a society, and I'm talking about the global space, where, for example, neoliberalism, which functions in particularly, and I want to bring it in particular to the African continent and South Africa in particular, which vehicles itself through racial or racial antagonisms, right? That kind of society would be a society where the dominant ideas of a class that is white supremacist in its outlook is going to be those ideas that prevail, right? And so part of the reason why blackface, I believe, has been allowed to go on for this long, and it becomes an issue when it's done at Stellenbosch or at UP or any other institutions of higher learning, but it's been allowed in the media, is that you've got a media that is itself, that serves and functions as an agency of a socialization within a neoliberal space that is dominated necessarily and logically by those who control the dominant ideas in a society, who are largely very white racist, very white supremacist people, and who want to perpetuate, therefore, the stereotypes around blackness that seek to dehumanize and animalize the black humanity. And so part of the reason why I think we've allowed it in entertainment is because in entertainment we've always we feed on the entertainment that is given to us. So we are told what we must react to. I mean, take, for example, movies on or stories on things like, and I'm talking about the real issues here, Marikana, for example, right? We were given our views on Marikana, our views on the Oscar Pistorius trial, and so on and so forth. We were told in very many ways, very subtle ways, what to think about those things. We were not given an opportunity to form our own conclusions about those things, because there is an agenda behind the scenes that is driving society towards a particular type of thinking. And so that agenda, because it is so ingrained in so many other agencies of socialization in society, in the schools, in the churches, media, and so on and so forth, it then becomes normal. It becomes normal that such a thing would be part of entertainment, because we are taught that that's something like that is supposed to be funny. Something like that is acceptable. You see, we are taught what is acceptable, what is good, what is not. And for me, like I always say, things go beyond blackface for me. It goes to how blackness in general is viewed and how blackness is fed in the world. How, for example, Lupita Nyong'o, who has always been around, has never been thought to be an exceptional person until such time white media elevates her to this extraordinary black woman. It's only then that society itself is then made to believe and to take Lupita in as this extraordinary, epitome of blackness, of brilliance in blackness. It's not divorced from the entire logic of mind control in society. Mind control that seeks to cement the value systems and the thinking of a neoliberal society. So I think for me, blackface in that sense, therefore, must not be divorced from entire agencies of socialization in a society that is geared towards a particular type of thinking. And I think with the issue of Trevor Noah, for example, right, and here, like he says, I wish there had also been a humor expert on to give us a bit of background on this one. But I think what Trevor Noah does is perhaps a bit more different to what Leon Schuster does, for example, right? Because with Leon Schuster, I feel as if the narrative is geared towards presenting blackness in a particular way. It does not teach you, I don't get out of a Leon Schuster movie, and it could be very subjective, right? Truth is always very subjective. My truth is that I don't get out of a Leon Schuster movie feeling that I need to go and interrogate particular questions about how blackness is viewed in society. Whereas with Trevor Noah, when he speaks, for example, about labor relations in the workplace, about job opportunities and so on and so forth, what kind of jobs are done by black people and so on and so forth, and you contrast that, or rather you juxtapose that with the lived realities of black people in South Africa and the kind of jobs that black people are doing. You look at that with the reports that come from Statistics SA about what kind of jobs black people are doing and so on. So you begin to realize that Trevor Noah is not necessarily doing that to bastardize or to dehumanize black people, more than he's doing it to teach black people something beyond just mocking them about what they are. He's not just talking about blackness as it is, as a construct. He's also talking about what blackness translates to in terms of black people's relationship to means of production and so on and so forth. So I think for me, Trevor Noah, the way he does it, it's more, there is some element of proper dialectics employed in how he engages this question, as opposed to the recklessness which I think is being employed by many other clips that you showed here.
And just to end off, Jonis, firstly, would you like to respond to this? And just before we end off?
I agree with what you're saying, but still, I think we definitely need to interrogate the extent to which kind of those in power are informing that what is happening in society. So what has become acceptable on television, to what extent is that informed by people who occupy power? But to me, that's not the whole picture. There is that element which I think is worth looking at. But I mean, people sometimes, for instance, Trevor Noah, if you sit on a bus in South Africa, it's quite likely that will be shown. And many people on the buses, ordinary South Africans of different races and usually not of the higher classes in our society, are not offended. They are actually enjoying it. Why is so? They're laughing, and yes, there might be an element of some kind of like hegemonic power relation at play there, but also perhaps they're just laughing because they personally find it funny. And why is it that we find that more funny and more kind of acceptable? So I think, yes, there are kind of this kind of top-down approach of power which informs various facets of society, but there's also society is similarly informed by those who are not in power, and those who are not in power are also expressing the agency, and their agency is pointing towards something like Trevor Noah being humorous. They are likely, I think, had you shown Leon Schuster, had you shown this clip on the bus, I think there's a lot that they'd be offended to. Many South African people would, out of their own personal agency, not so much out of what society has told them, would just find certain things offensive. So I think this is something I can't answer to at all. But I think I wonder about it. Why is it that we have these seemingly conflicting ideas? Are they first of all conflicting, our approaches to these different humors? And if they are, why is it acceptable? If they aren't, what does that say about us?
I think just to end off, Mika, where do we go from here? We've spoken about blackface in the media, we've spoken about pop culture, we've spoken about the university space, and the kinds of conversations that happen in a university and the expectations that come with being in a university, and understanding what it means to kind of, reappropriate these things. But where do we go from here? What direction are we taking this conversation about race? It seems to me that what you said in the idea of the commentary sections of your columns and things like that, there is a very polarized kind of, you're either, ultra racist or you're not. But as we've seen, there is a gray area sometimes, and there are things that people are still kind of working out. Where do we go from here, and what kind of conversations should we be looking to?
I think what Malaika did, which is important, is not to treat these things in isolation, but to think about the power structures that inform those and the type of social relations that inform the acceptance of certain things and the outrage by other things. But another important thing that I feel, sorry, I'm going to be lined slightly out of that's been missing, I think, from the predominant conversations, is that these were also women's bodies that were being assaulted. These were women's bodies, and this is, again, playing into capitalist, patriarchal, white supremacist thing of why is it that the black African woman is the one who is the space and the landscape in which these violences are happening? Because, the domestic worker is the most undervalued person in the society, who's come from a history of oppression, who's, as you said, taken care of these children who are the ones who are reducing their agency and reducing and devaluing their humanity. So another conversation, and I think what we need to shift in order to ask the right questions, is where's the gender question in all of this? Because that also becomes a problem. And even I think there was a comment, or there was an article I read where someone was critiquing Mr. Ndlanga, I think it is, about how his reaction to this is very male patriarchal, black male patriarchal, but hasn't asked the questions of what is the role of the female body and what is the violence that's been doing to the female body. Because people are focusing, and I still think that's an issue, on blackface, but what about the fact that they are stuffing their bodies to ridicule a particular type of body that is absent from the media, number one, and that isn't seen as something that can inhabit public space. The black female body, I really believe, is relegated to a private space, and this is part of, again, tapping into the white supremacist, patriarchal, capitalist global model that informs the way we socialize and the way the world works.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. And I really do hope that this conversation goes beyond the studio, goes beyond the university's walls, and goes into the public space, and people start to really think about these questions, and more broadly about the South African question, and not just the Blackface University of Pretoria student or the Stellenbosch student. And that's all we have. Thank you to our panelists for joining us today, and thank you for watching. That's all we have. Till next year, this is from the OppiTV 2014 team. Good night.
And I think our school system needs a complete overhaul.
Our top matrics are battling.
Without proper education, this country is not going to go anywhere.
So where are the solutions coming from, and why aren't we finding them?
We don't have the necessary education.